Imagine you are standing on the peak of the Capitoline Hill. It is the year 125 AD, under the reign of Emperor Hadrian. Below you, a sea of white marble and terracotta stretches as far as the eye can see. 1 million people, the first city in human history to reach such a number, are waking up. You hear the rhythmic clack-clack of iron-rimmed wheels on basalt paving stones. You smell the heavy scent of wood smoke, roasting meat from street stalls, and the salt spray of the Tiber River. This isn't just a city. It is the capital of an empire that controls 5 million square kilometers. It is the Caput Mundi, the head of the world. But what did it actually look like? Not the bleached, silent ruins we see today, but a city pulsing with color, noise, and terrifying scale. Using cutting-edge AI reconstruction based on the latest archaeological data, I am going to take you there. Welcome to the 2nd century AD, the era of the 5 good emperors. This was the absolute zenith of Roman power, wealth, and architectural genius. For centuries, we've looked at the broken columns of the Forum and tried to imagine the ceiling heights. We've looked at the gray stones of the Colosseum and tried to imagine the roar of 50,000 voices. Today, we don't have to imagine. We are zooming in on the textures of the marble, the vibrant reds and blues of the frescoes, and the sheer, overwhelming density of the streets. We're going to walk through the corridors of power, witness the blood on the sands of the arena, and climb the stairs of the dangerous, overcrowded apartments where the real Romans lived. History isn't a museum, it's a living, breathing experience. Let's step back 1,900 years. This is the Roman Forum. If Rome was the body, this was the heart. Picture yourself standing in the center of a square so packed with monuments that you can barely see the sky. This wasn't a park, it was a cluttered, chaotic outdoor office, courtroom, and religious center. The Forum was home to the golden milestone, Miliarium Aureum, the literal point from which all distances in the empire were measured. At its peak, the Forum was surrounded by buildings plated in real gold and African marble that shimmered under the Mediterranean sun. This small valley hosted over 10 major temples, 3 massive basilicas, and dozens of statues of gods and emperors. Can you feel the heat radiating off the stone? To your left is the Curia Julia, the Senate House. Inside, 600 men in purple-bordered togas are deciding the fate of provinces thousands of miles away. To your right, the Basilica Julia is a hive of activity. You see groups of men gathered around tabulae, gaming boards carved directly into the marble steps. They are gambling on dice games while waiting for their legal cases to be heard. The AI has reconstructed the Sacra Via, the sacred way. It isn't clean. There are scraps of papyrus on the ground, the smell of incense from the Temple of Vesta, and the constant low-level vibration of a city that never stops moving. Moving from the center of power to the center of spectacle, we arrive at the most iconic structure ever built. This is the Colosseum. But in 125 AD, its name is the Flavian Amphitheatre, and it is a marvel of high-tech engineering. It could hold between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators, and thanks to its 80 numbered entrances, it could be fully evacuated in less than 15 minutes. The entire arena could be covered by the Velarium, a massive, retractable canvas awning operated by a specialized detachment of sailors from the Roman Navy. Below the wooden floor lay the Hypogeum, a 2-level underground labyrinth of tunnels, cages, and manual elevators used to teleport lions and gladiators into the arena. You are standing on the sand. It's called harina, the Latin word for sand, which gave us the word arena. It is tinted red, not just from the sun, but to hide the blood of the morning's animal hunts. Look up. The scale is terrifying. You are surrounded by a vertical wall of humanity. The noise is a physical weight, a rhythmic chanting for the editor to signal the end of a fight. The AI reconstruction shows something most movies miss: the smells. The scent of wild beasts from the tunnels mixes with the expensive saffron-infused water being sprayed into the air to cool the crowd. It is a sensory overload of luxury and lethality. But while the masses are screaming for blood in the valley, the man who owns the world is watching from above. This is the Palatine Hill. This is where the word palace comes from. In the 2nd century, the entire hill was essentially one giant, continuous imperial residence. The Domus Augustana featured a private stadium for the emperor to exercise in, surrounded by porticos and fountains. The dining rooms had hypocaust underfloor heating, allowing the emperor to host banquets in his bare feet, even in the middle of winter. The walls weren't just painted, they were veneered with marbles imported from Egypt, Greece, and Numidia, purples, greens, and yellows that signaled absolute wealth. How did they achieve this? By sheer brute force and engineering. Thousands of slaves worked in the underpalace to keep the fires burning and the water flowing. As you walk through the reconstructed halls, notice the silence. The thick stone walls and the height of the hill block out the roar of the city below. It is a different world, a world of polished surfaces and absolute quiet. It's a chilling contrast to the chaos of the streets. Beyond the elite, ordinary people needed a place to escape the heat. This is the Great Bath Complex. In Rome, the public baths weren't just for cleaning. They were the social clubs, gyms, and libraries of the ancient world. The baths of Trajan covered an area equivalent to several football fields. Rome's aqueducts delivered over 1 billion liters of fresh water to the city every single day. The Frigidarium, the cold room, featured a vaulted ceiling so high it created its own microclimate. Picture yourself here. You've paid a tiny entrance fee, less than the price of a loaf of bread. You are surrounded by the elite and the poor, all stripped naked, debating philosophy or the latest gladiator results. The walls are covered in glass mosaics that glitter in the steam. But there is a hidden side to this luxury. Below your feet, in the service tunnels, hundreds of slaves are shoveling tons of wood into furnaces to keep these millions of gallons of water at the perfect temperature. Now we leave the marble behind. This is the Subura. This is the real Rome. While the emperor lived in a palace, 90% of the population lived in Insulae, apartment blocks that climbed 6 or 7 stories into the air. These buildings were notoriously poorly built. Collapses and fires were so common that Rome had the world's first professional firefighting force, the Vigils. Most apartments had no running water and no toilets. Residents had to use public latrines, or, more commonly, throw waste out of the window into the narrow streets below. The ground floors were tabernae, shops selling hot food, wine, and goods, making the streets a permanent gauntlet of noise and smell. You are walking through a labyrinth of shadows. The sun barely reaches the street level here because the apartment blocks are so high and the alleys so narrow. Look up. Those wooden balconies look like they might snap at any moment. Can you hear that? It's the sound of 1,000 different lives compressed into one city block. A weaver's loom clacking, a baby crying, and the constant shouting of caveat, watch out, as someone empties a chamber pot from the 4th floor. In the AI reconstruction, notice the soot on the walls. Most Romans cooked on small charcoal brazier stoves in these cramped, wooden-floored rooms. It was a recipe for disaster. But while the threat of fire was constant, the Subura was also the soul of Rome's economy. It was here that the diverse population of the empire, Greeks, Syrians, Gauls, and North Africans, mixed to create the first truly global culture. But how did a city of 1 million people avoid starving in a world without refrigeration? This is the Annona, the massive state-run grain supply. To see how Rome survived, we have to look slightly downstream to its gateway, the port of Ostia. Every year, over 1,200 massive merchant ships arrived from Egypt and North Africa, carrying 400,000 tons of grain just to keep the city fed. Rome provided a grain dole, free wheat, to roughly 200,000 of its poorest male citizens to prevent riots and civil unrest. In the city itself, there is a literal mountain called Monte Testaccio, made entirely of an estimated 53 million broken olive oil jars, amphorae, discarded over 250 years. Moving from the logistics of food to the logistics of trash, the scale of Roman waste is staggering. Using AI, I've reconstructed the bustling warehouses of the Emporium. Look at the rows of amphorae, each one stamped with the barcode of the time, labels showing the weight, the producer, and the quality of the oil or wine. It was a bureaucratic machine that wouldn't be seen again for another 1,800 years. Beyond the grid of the docks, we find the ultimate marriage of religion and engineering. This is the Pantheon. Completed by Hadrian around 126 AD, it remains one of the most influential buildings in human history. The dome is still, to this day, the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the entire world. The oculus, the 9-meter-wide hole in the center of the roof, is the building's only source of light, and yes, it rains inside. The bronze doors you see today are the originals, weighing 20 tons each, and they are so perfectly balanced that a single person can push them open. I reconstructed the interior as it would have looked in Hadrian's time, the niches filled with statues of the gods, the walls lined with purple porphyry and yellow marble. It feels less like a building and more like a microcosm of the universe. When you stand under that oculus, you aren't just in a temple, you are standing in the center of the Roman cosmos. But Rome's peace was never guaranteed by the gods alone. It was held together by the ultimate deterrent. This is the Castra Praetoria. Located on the northeastern edge of the city, this was the fortified barracks of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguards. The Praetorians were the only soldiers allowed to carry weapons inside the sacred boundary of the city, the Pomerium, though they often wore togas to hide their swords. At their peak, they numbered 9,000 elite troops who lived in a luxury far beyond that of a standard legionary. They weren't just protectors, they were kingmakers. On more than one occasion, the guard literally auctioned off the throne to the highest bidder. As you look at the reconstructed barracks, you see the tension of the city. Rome was a place of law, but it was a law backed by iron. The Praetorians were a constant reminder that the 5 good emperors were only as secure as the men standing behind them with spears. Standing here, at the peak of the 2nd century, it's hard to imagine that this world could ever end. The Rome we've explored through AI wasn't just a collection of buildings. It was a blueprint for the modern world. From our stadiums and apartment blocks to our plumbing and our legal systems, we are all, in some way, living in the shadow of the Caesars. I reconstructed this city to show you that these weren't just ancients in white robes. They were people who dealt with traffic, high rent, political scandals, and the need for public entertainment, just like us. Their eternal city eventually fell, but its ghost remains in the very DNA of our civilization. Thank you for traveling back to the 2nd century with me. If you want to see more of these lost worlds brought back to life, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. What historical era should I reconstruct next? Would you like to see the neon streets of Victorian London, or perhaps the gold-leafed temples of the Aztec Empire? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep looking back. History is closer than you think.